a business distribution unit, and each BDU chooses mostly which additional channels that they want. They all must carry. They're all within our regulatory framework. We have what's called a 91H mandatory must carry license. So every BDU in Canada must carry APTN. They can choose sometimes east or west, but we try to force them into, if whatever region they represent, they have to choose that particular one. Some of them will carry an additional, but not very many of them. Pretty much all of them, though, will carry one SD and then our HD channel. The only one who carries the most right now would be Bell Expressview, and they carry the north, they carry the east, and the HD channel.
Can I also ask, how does the subscription system work? Does individual, like family, pay to the local cable carriers, or pay to the TV station directly for viewing?
Excuse me, can
Yes.
I record? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and also I'll just mention too, and I will have to end right on time
Sure.
today for
Sure.
our ending, for make it in my next meeting. So how the distribution or the payments work is that the BDU, so these are the cable companies, the satellite companies, they send a bill to the household pays them, and they in turn pay us. And our regulatory body, the CRTC, which oversees our industry, they are the ones who have granted us a license with our subscriber rate. It is 25 cents, but we just finished our new license application, and it was approved and is now going to be 31 cents. So starting in January, our rates will move to 31 cents. So anytime a customer at home pays for their cable or satellite bill, within that cost is 31 cents. And then they pay it to the distributor, and then in turn the distributor pays it to us, and they pay them out on monthly basis.
So 31 cents is per month?
Per month.
Per month.
Per month per subscriber.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's mandatory. So we're in approximately 11 million homes in Canada. And when anyone wants to pay or get television, the way the regulatory framework works is that they have to first buy basic cable package, and then from there they can buy additional packages with more channels. We are in the basic cable package, so that's part of the mandatory setup of our regulatory body here in Canada.
So did you receive my interview question?
Yes, I did. I did have a look through some of them. I just returned from vacation on Thursday, so I was off for almost 4 weeks, so I didn't get to spend too much time with it, but I did do a scan.
That's okay. So because I'm doing the 2-year research project in Taiwan, which focuses on the globalization and rejuvenation of indigenous television, and I have read some research article that mention the Maury TV and the APTN are two successful examples in this field. So that's why I choose APTN and Maury as the good example for the TITV reference. So I have read the information on APTN website that APTN has chosen young people as the primary target audience. And why did APTN make this decision?
Yeah, it just really comes down to simple demographic information, because in Canada, is it I'm trying to remember the statistic. It's around, I'll have to pull the number for you, but the vast majority of the Aboriginal population is under the age of 25, and I believe the statistic is around 49, like half, pretty much half, 50% of the population is under the age of 25. So from that perspective alone, if the vast majority of our audience is so young, we need to target them in order to stay alive, because if we don't, then APTN will no longer exist in the future. Currently, right now, the vast majority of our viewers within the Aboriginal framework is over 35. So we're not attracting currently the largest potential market share of the demographic of Aboriginal people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what it comes down to. In Canada, the Aboriginal population is the exact opposite of the Canadian population. So the Canadian population is aging. Vast majority of Canadians are older. Aboriginal population is reversed completely. And when you look at the subgroups, so Aboriginal in Canada is an umbrella term. It covers First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. The Inuit population, 2/3 of them are under the age of 21. So it is even they're even a much younger population base. So APTN needs to target the youth generation right now to remain more relevant. Now, beyond looking at it from a market perspective, the other reason why it's also important is that we're finding that we're in this period where many of our elders are soon going to be passing on, and a lot of the traditions and cultures and customs could be lost. So we want to also target that youth generation to bring them back into being engaged with the culture and the traditions and with our elders. So from a cultural perspective, it's extremely important that we target the youth, not even from a cultural perspective and grounding them, but we're also in an issue where our Aboriginal population and many of the young are suffering from high rates of suicide, drug abuse, alcoholism, and with all of that comes problems of sentencing and gangs and whatnot. So we need to really focus on our youth right now to ensure that they are getting on the right path. And for APTN, we believe that television is an important vehicle in terms of reaching the youth and sharing our culture. So yes, we're about entertainment and we're a media company, but we're really at the core about the continuation and expression of our culture.
Is it because APTN needs to reach to the young people? So APTN need to develop itself to be a multimedia company. Is that the reason?
Well, we have to do that because essentially that's where the entire industry is going. And we've already made strides towards that. We do have an interactive website called Digital Drum. Digital Drum is our youth website vehicle, but we're going to be investing even more heavily into that, as well as trying to look at other ways for our current television programming that we developed to also have some multimedia aspects. So if you look at the industry as a whole, everyone's doing it. So from that perspective, we have to do it just to stay viable within the industry. But certainly the reason why I think also everyone's doing it is because the customer is demanding it. The youth they have their smartphones and they're doing the same thing that all the other kids are doing in Canada and the industry. And so we need to be able to appeal to them because we're still competing for their attention. We want them to engage with us and our multimedia platforms, not with mainstream. Otherwise we'll lose them and they'll lose their connection with our culture.
So after developing this strategy, have you done any audience research to find how the young people changed, the young viewers changed?
We have limited data as it's specific to Aboriginal people in terms of how they're using multimedia. We do have some, but the strategy itself that we have developed, we just recently finished that strategic plan. It was all around moving towards license renewal. We just finished our license renewal. We just literally got our approval last week. So we are this is day one in a lot of ways for us. So we're just beginning to launch the strategy. We've been doing parts of it, but the major thrust of targeting the youth is really going to start to just happen now in this current year. So I don't have any types of data at this point to measure to see how our strategy is really holding up to what it is that we want to achieve.
What is the most popular TV program for the young people?
I would say that it is Blackstone. Now,
Blackstone?
yes.
I have
Blackstone?
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about what this program is?
Blackstone is a drama television series that focuses on a fictitious reserve in Canada, and it has all the corruption that you could possibly think of that happens on reserve, and so or in life in general. It's a heavy drama because it deals with so many sensitive issues from alcoholism, drug abuse, rape, embezzlement, crooked chief and counsel. It just has the absolute gamut of the negative things that can happen in life. But it also has a group of people who are trying to resolve all that, who are trying to get past that, and it has elders in the show that that speak about how we should be rising above these issues. We also have individuals who are fighting to get rid of the crooked chiefs and councils. So it's a drama that is really about life on a reserve. It is fictitious. It's certainly, I don't think that there is a reserve out there that maybe totally reflects everything that is in this television show, but it has elements of things that do affect reserves as a whole in Canada. And so they have incredible actors and actresses on the show. It's won awards already. There have been some writers who've mentioned that they think it's one of the best dramas ever done in Canada. It is a really good show. But the other thing too, I just want to mention when we talk about what is currently popular, we do have certain measurement tools, but they're not as robust as we would like. So we only go to field once a year to survey our audience. So it's difficult at times to know and pinpoint exactly what it is that is appealing to our audience. In Canada, we do have something, our own measurement system. It's called BBM. And how BBM works, though, in their sample sizes, they have sample centers in Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and Victoria. So those are the only places in which that there are measurement boxes in people's homes, and then they spit out data every single day, and that's how all broadcasters figure out who's watching us. So we do get that, and we use that as a tool, but it's not measuring just Aboriginal people. It's measuring the entire Canadian sample size. So sometimes for us, when we're looking at what's popular and what's not, we also have to look at the data that's available to us from the perspective of these ratings are based on all of Canada, and we can't separate out, well, how many of them are Aboriginal or not. So for example, in Canada, our population base roughly right now, 50% of the Aboriginal population lives on reserve, the other 50% live on live in urban centers. The current measurement system, the daily one, doesn't measure at all them on reserve, right? Because they're just in the city centers I've mentioned. So specifically then when we start to look at, say, the Inuit population, we want to know which shows popular in APTN North. We don't know exactly because there's no measurement system there. So we only go into field once a year. It's very expensive to measure, and that's the time when we start to get a much more definite look, if you will, on specifically what people like and don't like.
Okay. And have APTN adjust the proportion of the program to appeal to the young viewers?
Well, we do currently have, I couldn't put a number if you're talking about investment dollars. I wouldn't be able to. Maybe that's something that when you meet with Monica, the director of programming, she might have that something more specific on that. But currently right now, we do have several programs that do target the youth, but going forward, we're going to be investing more money into targeting the youth because, as I mentioned, this strategy that we've developed, we're literally just launching it, now in this year, and so we're just forming currently right now our strategies to be more specific in terms of dollars spent and types of programming. But you may want to ask Monica to kind of go over that question a little further.
I see. And I'm curious about what's the different responsibility of viewers and the CEO. because the title is a little bit similar for me.
Okay, yes. And sometimes I'm not quite sure either. So my position was created, I guess we're going on 3 years now. And it was created because the organization was getting to the point in the size where they needed another C-level position to oversee the internal operations, to allow Jean to be able to more focus on the board, building some of our strategies, gearing up towards license renewal, and as well as working with some of the external bodies that he does work with. That doesn't mean that he is still involved in the internal operations, but the work was getting to be quite expansive. The position was also created, though, to become a mentor opportunity, to oversee and work with Jean to learn and gain experience, because he in time is going to be retiring, and they created this position to be someone who could gain knowledge and experience to then step into possibly his position when he retires. So I look primarily into the internal operations. We work, me and Jean, CEO, work very closely with each other, and I work very closely with all the directors, all the department heads. So essentially, in some ways, yes, our positions are sort of the same, but it's really that the managing the internal operations has become such a larger job here that that the two positions are warranted. And again, for the reasons that I mentioned, that eventually he's going to be retiring, and it's a great opportunity to build capacity within the organization for someone to succeed. Does that answer your question a little better? I mean, because we have the org chart there, as you can see, there's about 150 people in the company, and we have nine different centers in which that we operate out of. We're in every region of Canada, and so I, as you can see from that org chart there, which I'm sure if you're meeting with HR, if you asked for one, they probably would be able to share something with you. I oversee the directors. It goes CEO, and then there's myself, and then the CFO, who report directly into the CEO, and then there's myself, and reporting through into me is the directors. So we have director of HR, director of sales, director of community relations, director of programming, director of marketing, director of HR, and the director of operations, and director of news. So we have 8 directors. So
It's a
8
big
departments in the company.
organization.
Yeah, so 8 departments, or sorry, 9 departments if you count with finance. If you want to look at departments as being that, and 150 people about.
Okay, get back to the question. During the transformation to appeal the young viewers, does APTN worry about to lose the senior audience in the same time?
We're aware of it, and I believe that you can develop a program wheel that can still appeal to both. I mean, it's something that we have to be aware of, but certainly we're not going to abandon the older audience. We still have, news predominantly attracts an older audience. We still have many of our other shows that we know does attract the older audience, from documentaries to our investigative news programs to even a lot of the movies that we play, although that's not our core content, would appeal. And then we do have a lot of shows that are looking at elders, Wings Over Canada, Medicine Woman. I mean, there is a lot of content that's there that's still going to appeal to an older audience. And all of our new spending, even though that we said that our primary target is the youth demographic, we're still going to be spending dollars and investing into programming that appeals to an older audience. So, I mean, that is a concern, but it's certainly a concern that we can manage, and I don't think that we're going to lose them just because we're going to start to invest more into the youth programming.
So at this moment, how many percentage of programs are focused on the young people, and how many percentage is focused on the elder audience?
I think Monica, that would be a question that she would be able to answer. She'd probably have more specifics on that.
I will meet her this afternoon.
Yes, this afternoon, yes.
All right. And about the WIBAN, because
WIBAN.
the WIBAN, yeah, because APTN is a member of the WIBAN, and I like to know what's the positive benefit for APTN to join WIBAN.
Okay. Well, I know you're also going to be meeting with Jean, right? As well?
Not yet.
No, but you have no schedule to meet with him? No?
Maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will answer that as best as I can, but Jean, as CEO, he is probably one of the best because he is the one who's active working with the group. Monica also does work with the group from the programming perspective, but I haven't had much exposure. Most of it's through supporting, Jean or helping Monica. But from my purview, from what I've seen, I think that the benefits from working with them is the development of programming that can appeal to an international audience, if you will. So being able to work in co-productions together that can create opportunities for programming that is more cost effective as a group, but still appeal to our audience, because within that organization, that group of broadcasters, we're all appealing to indigenous peoples, and I do think that there are commonalities of programming interests that would appeal to all of our audiences, and if we work together to develop that further, then that means that we're all going to get content that is going to be less expensive, more cost effective, but yet still appeal to our audience. And I think that there is an interest and there is a flavor for our audience here to be more knowledgeable and get exposure to the worldly cultural life, if you will, of indigenous peoples. We had a program here where it was a doctor. She was an Aboriginal doctor, and she travels around the world learning about different medicines that different indigenous cultures use. And I know that there was interest in that show. Some of the other broadcasters actually here in Canada picked it up. So I think that Canadians generally do have an interest outside their own country, and I think that, and working with Whitman, we can develop programming together that's more cost effective, that would appeal to all of our audiences.
And in addition to the WIBAN, does APTN participate in any other international co-production projects, or with any other international TV production house?
Not that I'm aware of, no. No, nothing international. Not that I'm aware of outside of Whitman.
Is internationalization is the goal of the APTN?
No.
No?
No. And I mean, part of it is you would have to understand more of probably why that is. You have to look at how the funding works in Canada for television programming. So we, APTN, have a budget of money that we go out and spend to create programming. Now there's something called the CMF, the Canadian Media Fund. So we access additional dollars through the Canada Media Fund, which then they kick in money into create productions. Now the rules around that, though, are it has to be so much percentage. It has to be Canadian content. CMF will not fund you if you're doing international co-prods. And I don't know all the exact rules around it. Monica could expand further on it, but basically what it does is the CMF is primarily interested in Canadian content for Canadian audiences, and for us to trigger it, we must follow their rules. So for us, predominantly, we want to do co-productions with Canadian productions, not international. I mean, we do want to do Whitman, but there's a certain point where we would hit a ceiling where there's only so much percentage of international content that we can have on our airways. So predominantly, we will always be focused on wanting to do mostly co-productions with Canadian producers and Canadian broadcasters.
And when APTN try to appeal the young people, does APTN encounter any challenge?
Yes, the challenge that we have is that we live in a digital age where content that you want is at the touch of your click of your mouse, if you will. So the challenge for us is just building awareness to them of our programming, being able to market to them, being able to reach them, being able to compete with, mainstream media, if you will. I mean, those are some of our greatest challenges, and it's no different than any other broadcaster. We're inundated with choices. I mean, we live in a digital universe with hundreds of channels and YouTube and now, social media, which is just really taking up more attention in terms of entertainment, if you will. So that's our challenge. Our challenge is marketing our programs to them and appealing to them and being able to do it in a way that is going to attract their attention. It's expensive to produce some of the television shows that they are watching in mainstream. I mean, we can't compete necessarily in that realm. So that's where our challenge comes in. But the positive thing, about that, despite all those challenges, is that the Aboriginal youth, because they are so many in number, is that they, in this digital age, are creating their own content as well. And I think that the opportunity is starting to present itself, where we have the youth who are becoming our storytellers, and they're starting to create content. And that's why we launched Digital Drum, which Digital Drum is really an interactive social media website for our youth to share information with back and forth. And so the more that we invest into that strategy, I think that that's one way for us to overcome that challenge. Is we're basically becoming a space where, be your own broadcaster with us, if you will, right? Because that's where the world is partially going. So again, just to kind of recap, our challenge is attracting them in terms of how much competition there is in a digital universe, but how we're meeting that through some of our strategies is we're creating spaces for them to express themselves in a digital media. So from a pure kind of digital media, self-produced content, that is one way that we're doing it. But of course, being a broadcaster now, there's many different types of ways that you can interact with an audience. So that's one way. The other way is through, the dramas, the music shows, and non-conventional television. And we are just starting now to get into more strategy sessions in terms of what can we create in order to attract them to watch. It's going to come through star power. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing in Canada that, and even I should say North America, that there are examples of Aboriginal youth who believe in the culture, who follow the traditional ways, who identify themselves as being Aboriginal, and they're becoming mainstream. I think that the more that we see those things happen, it helps APTN and it helps us to move forward to create content that's going to appeal more to them. So I mean, even you look at a show like Twilight, which had the wolf pack. They were all Aboriginal. They became, in some ways, sex symbols. You have, and they are very young, and you have a lot of that happening now. So I think for APTN, it's how do we grab that youth star power and we bring them into the content that we're creating in order to attract that young audience. So the challenges are multiple fold when you look at that question. So it's us being able to market to them and attract them, us being able to create content that has high production value, that's going to interest them in great storytelling, and then also multimedia, and being able for them to access that content more easily, and then also a space for them to share and express themselves. So those I see are all the challenges there, but we do have our strategies, I think, positioned well to address a lot of those issues.
When you mention multimedia, which include the internet,
yes,
and traditional television,
yes,
and what else?
Well, I mean, and everything is all merging, right? So when you say internet, I mean, to me that includes the delivery system, and whether it goes to your TV is irrelevant to me. I mean, so I include in that Netflix and YouTube and Vimeo and even to some extent now you're looking at Twitter. I mean, when you look at what Vine is doing, I mean, they just launched not so long ago, and I'm seeing on YouTube the best of Vine videos, right? I mean, everything is so homogenized. I find that it's coming that We use one word today, and it means, when you say internet meant something 3 years ago, it means something different today. So when I say multimedia, what I basically mean is we need to develop content that is available to be consumed by all the types of devices that are available right now being used. So I kind of look at it from a device perspective now, because you've got people who literally will watch a television show at home, but they have their iPad opened up in front of them, and they're using both mediums at the same time, right? So I think that what we're also going to see is a convergence, and it's happening already, a convergence where television programs are going, okay, so how can I get their attention to watch this television show and also consume content on the iPad at the same time? And we've started to experiment with that. Our show, Aboriginal Day Live, is probably one of our most successful shows as far as the multimedia experience goes. We had, I think it was 3.2 million tweets during the show. We had, leading up to the show, we had hundreds of thousands of page views on our Facebook. We had Flickr running during the show where people were taking photos and posting them, watching the show. And I think we had close to 200 contributors on that. So we are ever increasingly looking at a product and saying, how can we take this content and what other types of additional content can we add to it that can be consumed by a different device? So whether that's you're just tweeting while you're watching the show, or whether you want to take a photo and upload it to the site while you're watching the show, or we want to put trivia on the website so you can sit there and pick up your laptop. Now, of course, you won't do that with every single show, but I think that you have to be strategic in saying, what is the genre of program that I'm working on, and does it make sense to build a multimedia experience with that? And so when I look at multimedia now, I'm more thinking about, from a device perspective, I think about it less and less as internet television. I more think about it as, what are the devices that people like to use, and how do I drive content to that? And should I drive that content to be simultaneous, or should some of it be content leading up to the show, and then some content that comes after because they're interacting in terms of what they saw? So it's kind of like there's real-time content experiences, and then there's pre-content, post-content experiences.
So can the majority of the Aboriginal young people access the internet?
The majority, yes, but the difficulty is that there are still many of them who don't have high-speed internet, where it might be dial-up. Because we're dealing with remote communities, or in some of the remote communities, they may not have access to high-speed internet because of cost, right? So when you look at the far north of Canada, it's very expensive to get high-speed internet in there. It is changing. I don't know what the exact number is. Who else are you also meeting with here at APTN? Are you meeting with Lisa Squire?
Yes.
You should ask her. She is the one who looks after research, so I think she might have some data on that.
Does the Canadian government give you the funding to
No.
solve the problem? No?
No. There are, I think, programs out there to get more internet in there, and I know of some partnerships that have happened, but I don't know any specifics around it. And I don't have an exact number. It'd be hard for me to really. I don't know if I had to guess. If I had to guess, I would say that at least 2/3 of the Aboriginal population, maybe probably even 75%. I'm sure that at least 75% of the Aboriginal population has access to high-speed internet. 25%, and maybe Lisa has some data on that. It would be a good question to ask her.
So, because I have read some research article mentioned that the APTN let the global audience to understand the Aboriginal cultures in Canada. So, I'm wondering how the international audience to reach your program.
Well, actually, I'm not sure where you pulled that from. One of our targets is the Canadian population. We don't really have a goal for global, because there's not many ways for them to actually access the content. Many of the program rights that we have for our television shows, we don't have worldwide distribution. It's just Canadian distribution. So we don't really at this point in time have a goal to attract a world audience into ABTN, because there's no way for them to actually consume our programs. Some of our programs they can watch online, but very, very, very few.
Oh, if I live in USA, can I see the?
No.
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 Oh.
No, you can't. No, our license is for Canadian distribution, and we do not distribute in Canada. I mean, in the United States, we just distribute in Canada.
Yes.
Based on your experience, could you give some suggestion to TITV how to appeal the young people to watch the indigenous television?
I think they need to see themselves in it. You know, they need to be able to see a reflection of themselves. So that's their own young people in the show. You know, I think that you have to develop your star power. You have to be able to develop the people that they identify with, that they connect with, and part of that I think is finding and developing producers who understand that audience, who can create something of their own. I think when I say that, it makes it sound so simple, because yet I know it is hard to do, but I mean, that's really what we're at, and what we exist to do is that APTN is here to reflect the lives of people in the culture, and so we have to reach out to our youth. We have to get them engaged and be seen on TV. We benefit from the fact that so many Aboriginal people are into entertainment. I really think in Canada there's this kind of music renaissance, if you will. It is as if there are so many Aboriginal youth getting into music, and that only helps for us, right? Because then there's more entertainers to pull from to create content around. So I'm not sure what the numbers and demographics are like for Taiwan, but I think for them to reach out is really for them to find ways to reflect the lives of the youth in their programming.
Do you think the money is the key point to?
No.
Because
it is and it isn't. Like I think it depends on the genre. Yeah.
Oh.
Genre of programming, I think it depends on. But I think it does in some cases. It does, but other times it doesn't. And we've seen examples in Hollywood of cheap movies that just took off. And the Blair Witch Project as an example. I mean, that was basically handheld cameras, and they were running through the forest and made this choppy movie. And I mean, they made millions and millions of dollars, and it appealed to the youth. So, I mean, there are examples where you can create something that is inexpensive, but yet, but again, at the end of the day, though, they're also consuming those types of programs that are high production value. So I think there's, depending what genre you're looking at, sometimes it does matter and sometimes it doesn't.
Because most of the program of TITV are news and documentary, but the young people likes to watch drama, entertainment show, or music.
Yeah.
So the TITV said they don't have too much money to produce the drama. So
Yes.
that's why the young people didn't like to watch TITV.
Well, an example, and again, like a lot of it also depends on core values when I also throw out some of these examples. But in North America, and this is not a Canadian show, this is an American show, but Tosh.0 is an extremely popular show with the youth in North America. And that is a extremely low cost television show, because what it basically is a guy who was a stand-up comedian stands up, and it's just a green screen studio that they have, so it's all just electronic thrown up props, and he talks about the funniest videos that are happening on the internet right now. And that's all he does. They find what is everybody watching, and then he provides commentary and that is extremely cheap and expensive to do, and it gets huge ratings in the U.S. and in Canada.
What is the name of the show?
Tosh.0.
Tosh.
Tosh.
Tosh. T-O-S-H.
T-O-S-H.
Point oh?
0. Yeah.
Point
Point
zero?
oh. Yeah.
Point oh.
So, and mind you, though, I mean, all of the humor is people getting hurt and doing stupid things on the internet, right? So, I mean, that's not something that we want to say. But my point to bring it up is that that's inexpensive. So, I mean, could you maybe in a more tasteful way have a youth person who's showing what people are doing online in Taiwan? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's not something that we had a chance really to look at here, and we're starting to look at these things. But I think that there are ways, and there are examples of youth-driven content out there that you can do that are inexpensive. The challenge part, I think, is how do you make it more relevant to your culture and not turn into just another, Tosh.0 in terms of the type of content, right? Because slapstick, call it slapstick humor or all this kind of stuff seems to appeal to the youth. But when you're looking at broadcasters like ourselves, that's not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is also more of the culture. And we do have shows that do show, in our drama shows, certainly, show the all types of difficult situations that life brings. But I do think that there is a way to build that star power, reflect the youth, and attract them. There are examples out there. It's just a matter of fitting into the goals of your content.
When you say low cost, is how much money?
Well, I guess for us, I mean, average, we'll spend, I'm guessing here, stuff that we have to produce, and Monica would be the best to answer it, but I would say the 20 to 30,000 per episode.
20 to Canadian dollars.
Yeah. I mean, for us, that's kind of where, I mean, their drama's more than that, though. Like, our drama is, like, The Blackstone is our most expensive show. Don't quote me on it, ask Monica, but I believe per episode it's probably upwards around 100,000 in terms of our license fee. Of course, there's other things that go into that. We have CMF funding and whatnot, right, and tax credits, and that. So it's more than that, but our cost, right, is around there.
I have a minor question. Why does ABTN choose its base in
Winnipeg?
Manitoba? It's like kind of in the middle, in the center of the whole country.
Because I live here.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. No.
Sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But well, originally it wasn't here. It started off in the history book. It'll go through. It actually talks about it, and it talks about the decision to come here. So if you read through the book, it'll give you a much better explanation than I can. But essentially, they were trying to decide between a few different cities, and I think it just ended up being Winnipeg because they. The cost to be here, the operating costs were lower compared to other cities. They felt that being in the geographical center made it easier then for flying if you're in the center point, because APTN has to service the whole country. And also there is a large percentage of Aboriginal people here in Winnipeg in order to attract for a workforce. And there are broadcast schools here and training development opportunities. So, there is a chapter in there in the book that actually does talk about that, the choosing and how that kind of came to be. But essentially, it just, when they looked at all the factors and they looked at the cities that they were choosing from, it just Winnipeg ended up making the most sense.
As I know, there are two funding systems for the indigenous television. One is like yours, is the subscriber fee, right? And the other is the funding from government. From your point of view, what are the advantage and disadvantage of these two systems?
Well, I believe that the best is through subscriber fee. Because any time that you have direct funding from government, I find that too much red tape or bureaucratic or rules can come into play. Control issues might step in. To have subscriber revenue is really more healthier in terms of the separation of, church and state, if you will. You're able to develop your strategic plans, and you're able to operate under what you think is best without any type of regulatory restrictions, because quite often, at least in Canada, whenever government funding is involved, the reporting requirements are overly onerous, and then even the cost to even go after that funding is rather onerous. Within this model, we're able to more operate like a business as opposed to subservient of the government, if you will, because I think that government funding has a lot of its challenges around actually its intention of how it begins to be given out. In terms of how it's used, I find it often changes over time, because as governments change over, their mandates change, and the will of the government on the time can swiftly change and take out a lot of that funding. So, and we've seen that in Canada. We've seen a lot of Aboriginal organizations who overnight lose half their funding because the government wants to go in a different direction. With subscriber fees, you're not going to run into that, right? At least we have a stable base to operate on, year after year after year, right? We've just gotten our next 5-year license, as opposed to with working with government, you're going to find out year after year what's going to happen. So you can't do that long-term planning, and you need that stability as a broadcaster, especially given the challenges within our industry that's constantly evolving with technology. It's pretty hard to evolve with that when you have a funding body that only gives you what your budget's going to be 1 year at a time. And I know you asked me to talk about maybe some of what maybe the pros are for government funding, but I'm pretty anti-government funding. I mean, I worked for an organization who Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. And we prided ourselves that there was no government funding, and we refused to go after government funding. We went after private sector. Vast majority of Aboriginal organizations in Canada are government funded, and all I ever see is all the problems that comes with. So I can't really think of anything positive, other than, I don't know, maybe as a startup, that's where it's positive, but I think long-term dependency on government funding is detrimental to a mandate of an organization. And again, I'm speaking from a Canadian perspective, so I'm sure in other countries it's completely different, and so I don't know if it's something that can be comparable in terms of realities of what's best for one television broadcaster versus another in a different country. But in Canada, it's more advantageous to not be dependent on government funding.
So the subscriber fee is sufficient to operate for APTN?
Well, if you asked any other, broadcaster in Canada, they would say that, we've won the lottery from their perspective. Like many broadcasters would love to have a mandatory carriage subscriber fee. For APTN, this past license renewal, we asked for a 15-cent increase, and we got a 6 cents. So for us, we're feeling a little bit disappointed at the moment, and that this is going to be even more challenging now to achieve everything that we want. However, it's still an amazing opportunity, and we feel that it's a great challenge, and we will overcome it, and we'll be able to still achieve everything we wanted in the strategic plan based on this new funding. But what it also tells us, though, is in order to fully realize a lot of those goals, we need to start looking at how can we make money off of our current programming. So part of our strategies now need to be adjusted and start to switch to actually become more profitable. So we need to now develop programming that's going to appeal even more so to a larger audience to get more ratings, so we can make more money off our advertising revenue. Because right now, roughly 95% of our funding comes from subscriber fees, 5% from advertising. Well, if we now start to invest and develop programming that appeals to a much wider audience with more ratings, then that revenue will go up, and then we'll be able to achieve those goals. So, kind of answer your question, is it sufficient? Not for where we want to go. So in order for us to get there, we need to start to get into more profit venture projects. And so that's the challenge for us in our next 5 years, is to really expand into that and go beyond the subscriber fee. We need to start to now develop business models that are not solely dependent on subscriber fees. And start to, which is what all the other broadcasters do, right? Most of the broadcasters in Canada operate off of their ad revenue, not off. I mean, there are some that do operate off subscriber fees, but it's been done through because they have high rating shows, right? There is a demand for it, so they can charge those higher subscriber fees. Those predominantly are sports channels. Sports is the most expensive content to create.
So can APTN broadcast the commercial advertising?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. We have commercial inventory.
So you can broadcast any kind of commercial advertising on APTN?
Can we put any advertising on? No. I mean, there are standards in Canada that you have to follow, and also our board has regulated that we cannot get any advertising for tobacco, alcohol, and gaming.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So we're restricted from that.
So the ad, the income from ad is so few because of the rating is
Yes.
too low. So
Yeah.
oh, I see.
Yeah. Because in Canada, right, there's 30, I think we're now 36, 37 million people. And out of that, Statistics Canada says there's 1.2 million Aboriginals. However, we argue that they don't know how to count Aboriginal people. Some of the people out there say there's around 2 million. So if you think from that perspective, if we've been all this time creating content that targets Aboriginal people, 2 million, I mean, that's a small audience to go after compared to the 36, right? And all the other broadcasters are appealing to a much wider demographic. So for us, if we want to survive and make more advertising revenue, we have to go after the other. Plus, earlier I'd mentioned the current measurement system doesn't even measure Aboriginal people. So we're kind of at a bit of a catch-22 there, right? Which is why we do things like play movies. One of the reasons we play movies is because that appeals to so many other people, and it's the movies alone that lifts our ratings up. It's none of the other programming. The only thing that we sell off of is the movies, which is why it's there. A lot of broadcasters have very similar strategies in terms of their content. They will have one mandate, and they'll say that this does not drive enough dollars for us, so they'll put other content on the shelf that maybe not be purely within within their goals, but it makes them money to allow them to work on achieving the other goals. So one of the things that we do, however, in our movies is we only play movies that have an Aboriginal actor or actress or connected into it. So Keanu Reeves is part Aboriginal, Cameron Diaz is part Aboriginal, so we only play movies that have an Aboriginal connection to it.
Regarding the online social group, how does APTN manage this social group? Will you assign a person to online to chat with them every day, or?
Yeah, we do have a full strategy there with Digital Drum, and on Facebook we have a whole team within marketing department, and there's people with various different responsibilities in terms of engaging. There is an online social media coordinator. Lisa Squire would be able to talk with you more of the details in terms of how that's structured. Okay. She oversees that department.
Because I missed the interview with Lisa.
You missed?
Yes, because I should interview her last Friday, but because the weather conditions, so my flights was delayed.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if I have the other opportunity to interview with her.
Okay.
Before Wednesday.
Okay. Okay. So, and I'm going to answer as best I can because she's really in the weeds of that. But so we have within the web department, we have a manager who oversees it, and then there's about 6 bodies in there that work within the framework now. But that includes design and layout and graphic design, all that kind of stuff. So they're not just people who are interacting with people online. They're building the site. They're filling it with content. we have one online community coordinator, and she's responsible for all of the tweeting, all the update statuses, and she does respond and she does engage with people. And then we have someone who is solely responsible for digitaldrum.ca, which I mentioned, and that's our youth digital website. And she is capable of, she does interviews through telephone, or she has a camera and she goes out and captures images and creates content for the website. So, and then she also pulls and aggregates a lot of content and throws it up online. So we really have two people who are fully dedicated into just the content and interacting with, and then all the other people, the four others, are involved in, you know, the design, the layout. But they also work on design and layout for other parts of the company as well, like the marketing materials that we produce and advertising and whatnot. So really right now we have two full-time people. News here, they have their own people will do tweeting and interact online, and they have their own way of going after that. There's one person full-time in news that just focuses on story and content online for news.
Will you produce the program especially to put online, or you just edit the program, a short part of the
No,
program?
The full goes on. Full goes online. So anything that you watch on TV, you can watch online. Yeah, we don't shorten it. We don't cut it up. It's fully online, except for news. News, you can go in and watch specific stories, but you can also watch the whole newscast.
Because if you put the whole program online, it is hard to share via the Facebook, because the program is too long. I mean, if
yeah, we don't put, like, we don't cut up the content that way. It's just not something that we currently do. And what happens with our producers is they may create additional content around it that would go up on a website or go up on Facebook, but we don't get into the practice of cutting up our shows to watch bits and pieces. It's just not something we currently do.
If somebody want to apply the job in APTN, is there any qualification should the people have?
Yes, so every single job in the company has a very specific job description, and then in there it lists what kind of specifications that we want. So our HR department is responsible for ensuring that those things are current and up to date with the various different department heads, and so every time we go forward, before we release a new job posting, we will review to make sure that what we're asking for different qualifications are current. Now, having said that though, our goal is to hire Aboriginal people. So we've had to develop a very robust training and mentorship and development programs here at APTN. At the very beginning, they were targeting Aboriginal people in schools to want to come here, and then paying for some of and helping them with some of that education. But now that we've launched and we've got a lot of key people in positions, now what we do is, when we look at hiring, if we don't have a successful or Aboriginal candidate who can fulfill all of those all of the skill sets, we'll look at what the gaps are. Depending how big the gap is, we will either hire a non-Aboriginal candidate on a contract term to then mentor the Aboriginal candidate, and then create a program that will be anywhere from a year to 3 years, depending on the level within the company. And then the non-Aboriginal person will slowly mentor that person to eventually take over, and then the non-Aboriginal person will leave and the Aboriginal person will take over. The other ways of doing it too is we may look at sending that individual person to school. Maybe the gaps are not that great that we can hire them and send them to part-time school or something, but that is one of the ways that we cope with ensuring that we're hiring and bringing in Aboriginal people. So we do have training programs to meet those challenges in order to ensure that we do are building the capacity of the Aboriginal workforce. And really that's key. Without that training program, APTN would not exist where it is. Our mentorship program is absolutely viable to our success, and I think that any Indigenous broadcaster really should look at that. They really should look at how are they training and developing their people when you're hiring on to ensure that you have that capacity. But even once they're in, like one of the things that we focus on is then training and development the next generation to move up in the company. So in many of our positions right now, we have people who are mentoring other people within the company so they can learn how to do their skill set. So we think it's very important that even when we're beyond the hiring, that we're constantly training and developing our staff so that we retain the knowledge and we retain our capacity. And I think for any Indigenous broadcaster, that's probably one of the most critical areas that you have to focus on is ensuring that you have robust training opportunities, but then also that you're retaining your staff and you're training and developing the ones that you have to move on into other positions.
Mm-hmm. And based on the APTN experience, what is the best marketing strategy to attract the young people?
Well, in order to attract them, I think that we've done fairly well. Like if you actually look at our workforce, it's predominantly young, which is good because that's a reflection of the current population and demographics. I think that for many of the youth, and I don't know exactly why or how it came to be, but we are sought after. People do want to work for us. We've been recognized as in the top 50 of Canada's best employers. And a lot of that has to do is because we focus in on a fair and equitable workforce where we believe in engaging with our employees. We include them. We have excellent health benefit programs. We have competitive salaries. I mean, overall, as any employer, I think that it comes down to the same no matter who you are in terms of how you treat people and how you create a positive workforce and in terms of how you create a positive work environment, engaging with your staff. I mean, we do all those basic principles of what a good employer does. And then beyond that, I would say it's because the average people who come here, for them, it's about the cause, right? I mean, we're a not-for-profit charity organization that is all about developing our and promoting our culture and way of life. So the people who want to come and work here, they're attached to that, right? I don't have a stockholder calling me up saying, you know, how many more widgets did you make, you know, this week, and how come our stock price isn't going up? And the conversations I have with staff is, you know, how are we going to engage our staff this week? What new programming that can create that's going to excite them? How do we honor our elders? I mean, the dialogue and the product is so integral in terms of how you attract your staff. I mean, it's the mandate to me that draws them in, and then beyond that, it's just doing everything that a good employer does is caring about their staff and being in an engaged workforce.
Mm-hmm. Will the globalization see the next goal for APTN?
I don't really see that. I mean, because we have so many challenges here within you know Canada in terms of attracting our youth audiences, in terms of expanding out into you know further multimedia platforms. The industry changes so quickly, and when you look at all our funding models, all of our funding models are anchored into Canadian content. So yes, I think we do want to sell some of our programming, you know, international, but it's not. I don't think it's ever going to be a primary target, right? It's going to be part of a multiple goals that we have.
Because I have read the annual report last year, so I see. It is said. We continue to share the stories of Aboriginal people with all Canadians and viewers around the globe. So I'm curious about how to let the viewers around the globe to know the stories about the.
Yeah, and I think that's a smaller goal even statement in there, because essentially the only way that it happens right now is there's maybe, I would guess, 5% maybe of our content is available to worldwide. So, for example, our news. We own our news content, and anyone can come online and watch that. But all the other programs are owned by the independent producers, and we don't have the rights to sell that or redistribute it. And then through Whitbin is the only other way, doing co-pros, that we'll be able to share our content. So I mean, to me, I think that statement is more about how the mentality of Canadians think, that we think of ourselves as global citizens, right? That Canada, the very makeup and culture of Canada is a cultural mosaic, right? It's a country that predominantly has opened its doors to all cultures from around the world, and so I think that statement is more of from the context of culture, yeah, not so much a reflection of a specific strategic goal.
I see. Okay. Language.
Yeah, but so within Aboriginal, though, I mean, that's an umbrella term. So there's 56 different Aboriginal languages in Canada. So I think Monica can probably tell you specifically. I think now we're up to around, we've broadcasted in 21 different languages. We haven't hit all of them yet, and I don't think we ever will. Because we just don't. Some of the languages are dying off, and we don't have producers who can create content in that language. But so I think we're up to 20. I think we're around 21 different languages right now. So I mean, it's rather complicated in Canada, right? We're not. I mean, that's one of our challenges for ABTN, right? Many of the other Indigenous broadcasters only have one Aboriginal language, whereas we've got 56. So our audience is segmented even further, and it's challenging when you only have a 24-hour wheel. How do you even fit all those languages in, right? So that's some of the challenges that is hard for us, but that's the great thing about the internet is that then we're able to put up a lot of that content online for people to go and watch as they want. So we're starting to get more and more into language versioning. So we'll have our drama shows, and we'll produce a drama show in maybe 2 or 3 other Aboriginal languages.
Have you received any complaint that the Aboriginal people say they didn't hear their language on ABTN?
Oh yes, constantly.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, because again, we've got 56 different Aboriginal languages. We don't produce them all, and even the ones that we do, it's very difficult to play it at a time, right? Because we only have a 24-hour window. Well, if we're already, versioning a show into 3 or 4 different languages, if it's an hour long, that's already 4 hours out of the day, and we haven't played all the other content, right? So we often will hear complaints of people saying, I'm not hearing it in my language, I'm not hearing it in my language. Some of the solution was that's why we went to the 3 different feeds, the North, East, and West, so that we can then push the different languages towards that region. But it's still not enough, and that's always a constant challenge, for us. I mean, there's just not enough hours in the day to produce. We would have, at one point we were looking at an all-language channel, but it just becomes cost prohibitive, because when you're producing content in that specific language, the audience is even smaller, right? So it becomes cost prohibitive to create more and more channels to try to appeal to all these smaller segmentations. I think ultimately, in Canada, I keep hearing about the evolution of IPTV, where basically someday we're going to get away from linear television, and basically one day we're going to get to the point, and VOD was the beginning of it, video on demand was the beginning of it, is you'll go to a channel and it'll probably look like an internet screen, and you're going to pick which show you want to watch as opposed to whatever we're feeding you. I think eventually when television evolves to that, which I think it will, then we'll be able to get over some of these challenges, because you can just say, okay, I want to watch this show in this language, and as opposed to waiting, okay, it's on at 8 o'clock and I'll watch it then, right? It would be more of a video on demand type of a system completely, and I think that's what we're going to see. Linear television, I think, is starting to slowly go away.
When we stay in a hotel, we cannot see the ABTN on the TV. Why?
So in Canada, hotels get to choose which channels that they want to deliver. So it's up to each individual hotel.
They don't have to buy the must-carries?
Yeah, that's completely different.
Okay.
That's the exception, because what happens in hotel rooms
Mhm.
is they have to purchase their own like distribution center, right? So they've got their own computers that they have to buy. It's rather expensive. That then sends the channels throughout the whole hotel. So they get to choose what they want to send out, and we have no, we have no influence over that, and it would be difficult to, I think, for the industry to try to regulate that, just because of how that is. Yeah, sorry you can't watch it in your hotel. There are some hotels in the city that you can watch it on.
Mhm.